This week's news from the tubes on F5 Live Refreshing Technology is proudly powered by Malwarebytes. Whether you use a PC, a Mac, or a mobile device, Malwarebytes Premium is the company's strongest protection ever. It fights threats that traditional antivirus software can't stop, plus it actively blocks threats like worms, rogues, dialers, trojans, spyware, and a whole lot more. It allows you to use your computer and mobile devices with confidence and peace of mind. To learn more and to get a special price, you can go to f5live.tv/malwarebytes. So in the event that you were living under some sort of a rock, possibly buried in several miles underground on Friday, there is an issue mostly across corporate America that brought PCs across the globe to their knees, and it came from an update to a piece of security software from a company called CrowdStrike that you've probably never heard of, but if you're in the IT world, you almost certainly have. The security software put out an update. That update, from what we understand from IT groups that I'm in, removed a small block of code that appeared to be unused, and that destroyed things inside of Windows, including BitLocker keys, which caused computers to reboot on a blue screen and then power up to recovery mode because they weren't able to access the BitLocker in the locked drive. Lots of places were negatively affected by this. Airlines, television stations, Sky News. It was fascinating. From what I understand, they had a camera in their studio that they ran a line directly from the camera to the outgoing switch, and all they had was that and a TV in the background that was on the Windows 11 recovery screen, and there was no switching, there were no over the shoulders, there were no throwing to packages. It was just a guy, he's like, this is where we are now. Let's try and do the news. It was a wild day. Fortunately, nowhere that I am uses CrowdStrike. I don't think you guys do either, right, Abram?
Not that I know of. We didn't have any problems with outages.
Okay, so that's good. But most of the airlines were grounded. I learned, once again, from you, that Southwest managed to survive, but only because apparently their systems still run on Windows 3.1 or something like that. So, hooray for 32-year-old technology. But yeah, this one update brought basically the entire internet to its knees. It's not the first time we've seen an update destroy infrastructure. In 1990, AT&T long distance, somebody pushed a single line of code change to production without running it through tests. They're like, oh, what could this possibly do? And it took down all of long distance in North America. Earlier this year, a software update also took down AT&T's wireless network for a while, although it's important to note those are two different companies. And in 2010, McAfee did something very similar to what CrowdStrike did. He wanted to call it CloudStrike, and it is a real problem for me. CrowdStrike put out a bad update and brought both, if I remember correctly, both consumer and corporate machines down. Interestingly, the chief technology officer of McAfee at the time is the current CEO of CrowdStrike. Whether those things were related, I don't know, but I would guess that there's some pretty lax standards in their software department. Anyway, this was wild, Abram. I woke up to this And we were all on high alert because nobody quite knew what was going on when the day started. Quite a way to start a Friday.
Yep. Well, look, I mean, I'm glad it's still interesting, right? I'm glad we're still keeping it interesting around here. I
Indeed.
mean, I'm thankful every day for bugs and security holes and crashes because if everything worked as advertised, there'd be no need for news. There'd be no new need for advice. Just you know, take everything at face value and be happy. But thankfully, not everything is perfect. We live in an imperfect world, and
Yep.
that's where the interesting stuff can happen.
The business
Um,
of interesting, not good.
yes, right now, look, I mean, it
I
was
just
bad for a little while.
in
For
solidarity with those who were affected. This has been my lock screen since Friday because I think it's funny. It's it's an altered version of the Windows 11 blue screen of death uh, with the with a QR code and everything. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty wild there for a while.
yeah, I mean, it was for a little while. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us that when something is done not on purpose, right? This was a we by all accounts a mistake,
Yeah,
an honest mistake. Um, well, what about if somebody did it on purpose?
right, right, exactly. There's so much potential, and we've talked about malicious code making it into production across the world, right? There was a particular popular NuGet or Node PM package that was used kind of by everybody, and then somebody put malicious code into it and it started deleting servers. You know, and that was done on purpose, but kind of it was a weird situation. But I mean, there could be way more complicated things than that could happen on purpose. They could truly bring, the world to its knees.
Yep.
And we're just talking about a software update that grounded planes and almost turned off Sky News. But, we've got other infrastructure issues possibly on the horizon with Taiwan, right? There's there's big possible purposeful things already on the horizon, but if a hacker got in and managed to do something even close to this, it could be devastating. The Our
Right.
technological infrastructure is still held together with scotch tape and crossed fingers.
Yep. Now imagine if an enemy, state
Mm-hmm.
or an enemy group decided that they wanted to do something like this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like the thing that pops into my mind is uh if somehow like China or North Korea or Russia was able to get a hold of the Newton soft packages, the I know most of our listeners, unless you're a software engineer, you don't know who Newton Soft is. But if you do, you know that the entire world is dependent on that package. It is almost every piece of software you interact with on a daily basis is one way or another dependent on the Newton Soft NuGet package. And if that thing were to somehow be compromised, woohoo, the damage that would be done would be wild.
Right, right. I mean, obviously there's just so much potential damage in such small, um, you know, it's amazing how the global economy can be so in such a precarious place.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, we don't know how much money was lost due to CrowdStrike. It sounds like not a big deal, but
Except for
um,
CrowdStrike.
I mean, they're not a big deal for the rest of us. But,
Yeah.
but
Their stock price is in the toilet.
yeah. So buy low, I guess. But but like I was reading the other day, for example, that um, if Taiwan were cut off, like Taiwan chip production was cut off from the rest of us for whatever reason, either it got destroyed or mainland China took over, and then the other countries boycotted. Well, that would account for something like $7 trillion of the global economy,
Woof.
and that would be the equivalent of like, was it something like, no, maybe was it $7 trillion or 7% of the global economy? Either way, not
Either way,
good, right?
it's a big number.
Either way, not good. All based on the chip production that takes place in Taiwan. So think about,
Because we've gone and centralized everything in one place like idiots.
yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not good, right? That's why. That's why, obviously, a lot of countries, including the United States, are trying to get chip production inside their own borders. But the companies that are responsible for doing that, like TSMC, are not seemingly in a huge rush to do it, and so we're probably many years away from having that capacity. But anyway, not to derail it, but like, this just shows how easy it would be, like if you take one of those foundries offline for a day, right? Like, that has a significant global impact.
Yeah.
And that's not even, and that's just a day, right?
I mean, look at what happened in 2020 when the foundries were offline for like 4 weeks in the first batch. They were offline for 4 weeks, and Ford stopped production. Well, they didn't stop production because I guess they weren't entirely paying attention. They kept making trucks hoping that the chip shipments would catch up, and they ended up filling NASCAR racetracks with pickup trucks that couldn't be finished because of a dozen chips and they sat for like a year waiting on chips to show up in that initial 4-week shutdown. I mean, and Ford had a year worth of trucks that they couldn't sell. The dealership kept calling my dad from Toyota. They're like, "Hey, we know your lease isn't up yet, but we'll give you more than you paid for your truck if you bring it in today."
Right.
That's
So
how desperate they were for it.
right. So we are in an increasingly connected world, a connected economy, and if you take down uh, the means of producing things that everybody needs in the supply chain, then things could get really bad really fast, and that's what this calls attention to.
Yes, it does, and it's the second time in a couple of years that we've had something big and obvious kick us in the stomach. Although, from a general public standpoint, a shortage of pickup trucks didn't quite, hit the general public quite the way that so many people saw their work laptops not power on Friday. Right. I think that for the general population, I think that made a bigger impact. For you and I, you know, the pickup trucks were a big story. That was a big deal. Knowing what was going on with chips, that light bulbs weren't being made and all that stuff. You know, we saw that, but most people didn't. This was everywhere. We were at dinner last night, and it was one of the top stories on the TV behind me. So, you know, I think this one is affecting, giving access to more people to the problem, which, in the end, at least something good has the ability to come out of this. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. If you did, please subscribe to the channel down below, and of course hit the notification bell, because we know that subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. If you've got topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future, please comment them down below. And if you'd like to not follow us on YouTube, there's lots of ways that you can follow along with our content by going to plughitslive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all of the ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.